like if we haven't solved our own issues of dealing with people of different cultures and different orientations and stuff, to me the best like alien stories are like Ender's Game or Adrian Tchaikovsky or stuff like that that can provide a pattern for us dealing with the others that do exist in our own life, which right now are other humans and other animals.
Before you go out and try to encounter aliens, maybe we should go out and encounter our neighbor that we don't even know their names.
They're already alien.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
It's all our hubris to think we're the best thing, the first thing. If there are species with different technology, superior technology, they probably would have been farming us for whatever reason.
I think it's going to be a big thing, you know, as we move into the age of Aquarius. I think that's going to be a central theme. Like, for example, when Pluto moved into Aquarius just recently last year, like right when that happened, there was all the crazy news coverage and like the hearings and the weather balloon or whatever, you know, and like I don't know, just like noticing the patterns. I think it's going to be a theme.
What if aliens are evangelicals?
How does this relate to confessionalism?
You must confess. Do you believe in aliens? Will aliens save us? Tell me.
There are like 2 books that I would say that involve aliens saving us, and I'm going to spoil them, sort of. But one of them is by Adrian Tchaikovsky, and it's the Children of Time series, and it involves the aliens introducing a substance, which I think plays like a more symbolic role, but it's instantiated in a physical substance in this, into the humans and into their own species, that allows the humans allows all aliens to see each other as all interconnected, and to see that like I am you and like we're the same, and it ends it's really beautiful, and the build-up is great too. But basically that's the idea, and then both humans and humans and humans and aliens, because of this sort of substance, which could represent something like communion or love, it lets them see each other as like the same. And then the other one is Arrival, and the way that the aliens impact the humans in Arrival, and it's similar. And it's like by bringing into a community.
That movie Arrival, did you ever see Arrival?
Oh my gosh, don't even get me started on Arrival. I would consider it the most profound story made in my lifetime.
Wow.
Have you watched the film?
Yes.
Okay, so when I looked at Arrival, I saw a mountain. She is climbing the mountain to have an encounter with the great other, to learn the language, the transcendent language, and then descend that mountain and teach or disseminate that language to all of humanity, thus saving it. So if you learn a new language, you see the world in a different way. And if you learn their language, then you have a higher or a transcendent way of seeing the world and getting outside of, linear time and seeing it, I guess, more teleologically, you could say. Mm-hmm. It's funny you bring this up because I think I'm going to be having a talk with JP Marceau, who's really interested in aliens all of a sudden, and it's a creation story. You have the humanity coming up from the earth up the cosmic mountain to meet the great other, you could say.
Yep.
She receives the language, the grammar, we could call it the word, from the alien race that came. Turns out they're benevolent, which is nice. It's not like Independence Day alien movie.
Yeah.
So in this alien invasion movie, they're benevolent, and Luis is going to be like Moses, who receives these patterns. And of course, in the movie, it's awesome. They come in like these logographic symbols.
It's almost like poetry, but in visual terms. The question is, what is their intention? Mm-hmm. There's an ambiguity about the strain, because in a way, it is the limit of your world, but it really can be the end of your world. This is the question, right? The angels in Genesis that wanted to teach people science and skills and stuff. Would there be a way to see that story from another point of view? Like, could you think that they came to help us?
The Book of Enoch reads, Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth and the art of working them, and bracelets and ornaments and the use of antimony, and the beautifying of the eyelids, and all kinds of costly stones, and all coloring tinctures. The whole earth has been corrupted through the works that were taught by Azazel. To him ascribe all sin. Bearing in mind this latter assertion, it is interesting to note that Azazel was associated with the rite of the scapegoat, which was mentioned before. And just like the scapegoat, it is Azazel who is blamed for the sins of human beings. At the command of God, the archangel Raphael was sent to bind him hand and foot, to cast him into an opening in the rough and jagged rocks, where he is to abide in darkness until the coming of the day of judgment. The Enochian account is describing a figure very reminiscent of the Titan Prometheus, who, after giving fire to humanity, was punished by Zeus and bound to a rock. The pagans held Prometheus in high regard. His name comes from the Greek word for forethought. It was even said that humanity was fashioned by Prometheus. By contrast, the Book of Enoch vehemently despises the angel Azazel, who is to be cast into the fire at Judgment Day. Once again, we find a story with two faces.
Are they going to be benevolent? Are they going to be malevolent? Is this Arrival or is this Independence Day? They ended up killing one of the aliens.
He's coming down with the knowledge of the good in a world that is like messed up in many ways, so people will want to kill him.
We watch the movie and we almost know, like we know that they're good because there's something about the movie which is telling us that. But it's not. If you kind of place yourself within the narrative, it's not obvious. It freaked me out a little bit.
No, I think there is a strong argument that these could be, how'd you say it, like demonic or negative forces that are confusing humans. Like, I acknowledge that you could totally see it that way. But
there is a sense which is true, which is the idea that if you were to learn the language of angels, right? So you have this idea of the language of angels, which St. Paul talks about. You know, although he says, like, I'd rather have love than the language of angels, but there's still the notion that there is such a thing as the language of the angels. And so there's a sense in which if you had the language of the angels, then you would transcend time. It's like you can see the pattern before or while it's happening. So you are not a slave to time as much. You're not as much someone who just kind of experiences things and never knows what's going on. You're just kind of a slave to the process. But rather, if you learn the language of angels, then you're lifted above the phenomena and you're able to perceive it in a more in a bigger way. And so
the actual powers that we have right now would be full. They would be fulfilled. Filled to the full. And this would give us access to all kind of different perception of reality, or even engaging with reality.
I mean, eventually we'll be talking about music as a language. It is communication, but then it's not just communication. It's doing things that mere communication doesn't do. Music is a universal language. We are communicating through a shared idiom.
We can't take a scientific approach, right? Like, we can't start with Ian's approach because we can't calculate our way into connecting with them. It has to be at the relational and personal level first, and that's our point of contact. And in order to do that, we have to learn their language. We have to communicate.
If you compare and contrast Spielberg's movie or story, where like music is a universal referential point, the first point of reference, then we can begin this relationship. Or is it Arrival, where it's verbal and written language? And is it actually like a spoken written thing? So is it music or is it spoken written? And with Arrival, it's interesting though, because it is auditory, kind of like the birds. We don't understand what the bird is saying, but we can tell that there's music and sound happening. Same thing with the alien species, the heptapods in Arrival.
The language that she learns there is an access to the logos, like that is outside of time. It's why this language gives, like, it connects the future and the past.
Like you said, if you were able to have certain insight into a higher language, then you could experience the connections of time in a different way. Like you wouldn't be stuck in a linearity, in a boring, like in a very one-dimensional linearity that we tend to be in.
And so they start out like, butting heads, but then over the course of the movie, learning this angelic language, you could say, allows them to have some form of union or even communion, where the two opposites suddenly find a way to complement each other. And then finally they get to this deeper place together that answers the big question, what's your purpose on Earth, and allows them to save the day and bring the movie to a close.
Because the whole point, humanity's new purpose is to make it to the second arrival. Which, I don't know if you're picking up on this, I haven't spilled the beans yet, but like, they're laying out a Christian eschatology. She realizes that in order to go from this first arrival and get to the second arrival, we have to procreate. It has to become flesh. It has to be incarnated. The language that she received, it has to proceed. It's not good enough that we talk about the heptapod language. It has to be made flesh. And so they exemplify this. They show the scenes of her like making the word flesh.
Our aim is future. It's the second arrival of Christ and what that will bring in the age to come.
Yeah, for sure. But it's also important to understand that it's not the future in a general sense. The future is not just any future. It is the future in which the totality of the elements will be brought together into their telos. And we know that happens because it happens all the time, right? It's like you decide to go to the store, you know you're going to the store, you know you're going to get things, you know you're going to come back. And so, but you know that the finality of how that's all going to come together will only manifest once you've finished, once you've come back from the store and put the groceries on the table. And so but you can see it as you're going towards the store. You can sense it. You know it. You don't know totally what's going to happen, but you can it's coming together as you're experiencing it. And that's what eschatology is, but for a cosmic scale.
St. Paul says that. He says like we can see dimly. It's like we can imagine or see even dimly the future, I guess you could say, or but then we'll see clearly, one day.
Yeah, and that's fractally true. It's like, you've got the basketball, you're going up for a layup. I mean, you can see dimly what's going to happen, but you as you're doing it, as you're coming up for the layup, you can perceive it like as a vague thing that you're moving into, and it's right, and you know it's happening. And then once it's finished, then it's like, boom, it all has come together. And now you've seen it. You've seen it in its totality, right? And then you have this, and so it's like that for all things. We always experience the world that way. And what St. Paul is saying is basically there's a giant version of that. There's a giant version in which this movement we're moving towards the halos, and we can see it. We can kind of know that that's what we need to move towards. We can see dimly the forms taking shape as we're coming into them. But that we know, because we've seen it and we've experienced it nonstop, that in some point, all of this is going to come together, and that we're going to see the whole thing in its clarity.
Climbing up the mountain is not just a straight shot up vertical. Yeah. It's like cyclical, or it's like a cylinder where like
a spiral.
Yes, a spiral. Spiralic.
We as humanity kind of climb a mountain collectively. And at some point, there's going to be an end to that mountain. The mountain doesn't go on indefinitely in a spiral. We're going to reach the summit, and we're going to be on top of the mountain on the New Jerusalem, and the divine liturgy with God Himself presiding over it.
The ladder of heaven, it's a cloud at the top. You don't quite see the top, the last rungs. You look at the cosmic trees. There's a cloud canopy at the top, right? Okay, so in Arrival, once they get up to that certain section, the limits of Earth and man-made technology, there's that liminal cloud-like layer, the mystery that's veiled of where exactly heaven and Earth, cosmologically speaking, touch. Like it's veiled.
At the highest level, it's experiential. It's not just intellectual.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point.
What you can share can only be understood by some, in a sense. I mean this in the sense that you need to have lived it.
I always use color as the example, like the person in like a black and white room who knows all of the data about color but has never seen it. And then if you were to put them out and to allow them to see color, there would be something that they would learn from seeing it, from the experience of it, that would be impossible for them to learn by knowing all of the technical data and knowing what it's supposed to be like, et cetera, et cetera.
This reminds me of when Chad was talking about the taste of a banana, like if you ever trying to describe it. And I remember having I thought about after that, where I was really racking my mind, like, how would you describe vision to a blind person? You know, because if we're using analogous, if we're talking about true vision or like spiritual sight or something, how do we talk about that?
You love.
Yeah, I think it comes back to just like doing it. But talking about it's like somebody who's blind, like doesn't have eyes. I don't know. I was trying to imagine, like, is it possible? And I was imagining, like, trying to describe it where it's like you can touch everything, like maybe describing it through an analogy to a different sense.
Yeah.
Where it's like, imagine you could touch everything. If you put a straight out line, you touched everything, but then that wasn't overwhelming and like, or something.
I
It's
think
terrible.
It lacked the experience he exactly had, but like, that's what the poetics are for.
If you just jump into like a super cold lake in the middle of winter, and you have no experience with it, or right away when you do it, all you are is like cold, 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 cold. That's all you can sense. It's just cold, cold, cold. That's it. You're overwhelmed. That's all your salience has the aptitude for. But once you've acclimated and gotten used to the capacity for the cold, you can start to see other things, and you can listen to the birds, and you can hear other whatever. And it's like moving in next to a train or something, and right away when you first move into the next train, all you hear is train, 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 and then you live there for 10 years or you grew up there, you don't even hear the train. Like it's nothing. And he said whiskey's like that. The first time you take whiskey, you're just like, that tastes like gasoline.
Yeah, that reminds me of like Wim Hof, like the guy who like climbed Everest in his underwear. It's like, that is possible, you know? It's like, this goes with all experiences. It's like, maybe there's some way of encountering like the anxiety of an interpersonal relationship. If we're thinking about that as like the cold Everest, maybe there's a way of relating to that that's entirely different from how we do it.
So those gray aliens are essentially just demons.
I had
try to explain what it's like to get drunk to somebody who's never got drunk. And
trip on acid.
Try to explain what it's like to have sex. I mean, all these things are so. I mean, they're so deeply phenomenological.
It's like Peugeot. 10 years ago, nobody would have understood what he's talking about. And even now, like somebody who listens to none of this, who pays no attention to this, and you try to explain symbolism to them, you're not going to understand Peugeot until you watch hours and hours and hours of Peugeot. You're not going to understand me until you interact with me over and over and over and over. And if you think you understand someone right away, you don't. You're not saving the appearances. I promise you.
Classic. God, classic.